The new PM will be the fourth resident of Downing Street Nicola Sturgeon has dealt with since she took office nearly 8 years ago. From David Cameron through Theresa May and then Boris Johnson, the dividing line has remained the same. The SNP's demand for another vote on independence rejected by all three Tory Prime Ministers. So will things change under a Truss premiership? This morning I spoke to Akash Paun, a senior fellow at the Institute for Government.
Well, as a new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, I think, does have an opportunity to take some steps to reset and improve relations with the Scottish Government and indeed the other devolved administrations. We've seen it with some previous Prime Ministers. I remember Theresa May, for instance, in her first week as PM, touring the UK, meeting with all the devolved leaders, and at that point, talking up the prospects of a joint approach to Brexit, which obviously ultimately did not quite pan out. But there is a kind of window of opportunity for Liz Truss, I think, to take those kind of symbolic steps to show that she's willing to work in a more collaborative way with the devolved leaders.
Is there any way, though, that two politicians who are so fundamentally different, ideologically, left and right, and in terms of the constitution question, one in favour of independence, the other obviously against, can they actually achieve anything together?
Well, on the constitution, I think, as you say, there's very little possibility of them seeing eye to eye because their objectives are fundamentally opposite to each other. And Liz Truss has indicated or said very clearly that she's not going to allow or facilitate a second independence referendum, potentially might even legislate to block one. What we'll see happen first of all, which Liz Truss and her advisors will have to be watching very carefully and be ready to respond to, is the Supreme Court case, which is being asked to determine whether the Scottish Parliament can hold a referendum under its existing powers. So that might force her to take a closer interest in the issue. But I think her default position is simply she will use the power of Westminster to, if necessary, block a referendum and show kind of little interest in constitutional issues in general.
Does government in Whitehall properly understand, well, the devolved institutions, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, or has it been a case of devolve and forget?
I think there's been improvement in that respect. At the Institute for Government, we've done work on this kind of question for a long time, and we've often argued that Whitehall and Westminster need to improve their understanding and engagement with devolved issues. And I do think over the past few years there has been some effort put into that. There's better engagement at civil service level, certainly, than I think was the case a few years ago across a range of government departments. Of course, processes and procedures can only get you so far, and when it comes down to it, the UK government under Boris Johnson has been far more willing than any of its predecessors to, essentially interfere without consent in devolved areas, to change the powers of the devolved institutions, to spend money on functions that are hitherto been seen as devolved. And it's those kind of concrete actions that have really led to this very poor state of relationships.